Although educators are all speaking out about the need to engage students in relevant and meaningful project work, Plato in 300 BC was addressing this very same need. He is quoted as saying, "Do not then train youth by force and harshness, but lead them to it by what amuses their minds, so that you may discover the peculiar bent and genius of each." Planning for engaging experiences in the classroom is based on learning theory and the research around what is now known about the structure and function of the brain. There are many voices in education that are saying we need to get students out of their desks, working on real problems that have deep meaning for them. Well, we call these engaging experiences learning adventures. See, an adventure is always more interesting than any one single event in life. Just the word adventure conjures up an exciting or remarkable experience, an undertaking, risks into the unknown. An adventure is not always predictable, and it's definitely not always prescribed. An adventure in learning incorporates engaging scenarios for the students that put them into relevant context to solve a problem, to find a solution, and to work together as a team to tackle something that's very complex, interactive, rich, and real. Adventures in the classroom go beyond the textbook, the workbook, and the teacher-directed lessons. Learning adventures turn out to be just that, an adventure for both teachers and students. Hello everybody, we're here today because we want to talk about learning that's meaningful and relevant. And I think you represent the mostly grade 2 to grade 6, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about elementary learning adventures. And I thought we could kick off our discussion today with a quote from Renata and Jeffrey Kane, who have done a lot of research in mindful studies around the brain for what they call natural learning. They wrote a book called Making Connections, and in it they say, teachers must immerse learners in complex, interactive experiences that are both rich and real. And we're here to talk about those kinds of experiences. So my first question to you is, how do you do complex kind of learning with these young children that makes it relevant, rich, and real? What do you do?
I think part of it is tapping into something that really is going on. So there's the real aspect. We just started transforming the Titanic. And it's a natural hook already. Kids know about the Titanic. Yes. They know it sinks. It's something that people already are so fascinated by. And so we don't really even have to do a lot off the get-go to get them interested. They want to learn about the Titanic. But then to involve the curriculum, which is boats and buoyancy, we say that they've been called to make the architectural plans for Titanic 2, which is also really being designed by a man named Clive Palmer. And so he challenges them to come up with their plan for Titanic. So in learning about this boat and the tragedy and being pulled in with that, they're also having to learn the components of a boat, what makes it float, what's the shape of the hull, how does it carry cargo, how could you make it, all the curriculum outcomes are tied in there. And they write a story of their experience on the Titanic as well. So it's a narrative story writing experience. And the writing that comes out of it is amazing because they are a character on the Titanic. We take them through some fun activities. We act out the boat sinking and Carpathia comes and they're screaming. And so there are things that they get so caught up in it that the writing that comes out of it is incredible. So it pulls in science and literacy. And I think the hook is that it is a real event that happened.
Well, the brain thrives on meaning and not just random. So I've heard that explained that you do the concept before you give them the details for the brain. So you've got some Velcro for something to stick to, and so that's what you've created. Anybody else got anything to say about rich and meaningful and relevant and interactive and the kinds of things that you do?
Well, we just finished our Save the Polar Bears. And it is, how can you help save the polar bears? Because the reality is they are a threatened species. And so just that natural hook, we give them some facts about, so creating that relevant meaning for them, and that there's a real emotional tie to this, where we are doing things in our world that are causing this problem, and that the help of the polar bear is actually is an overall look of the health of our world. And so that to them, not to mention that they're so cute, ferocious, but cute, they really enjoy learning about that and finding ways to help.
Well, J.W. Wilson, who we've met, he's from the Advanced Learning Institute, and he calls relevancy and meaning and these hooks that you're talking about as the holy grail of learning. And he's saying for good learning to happen, from what the brain researchers have showed us, you've got to engage that personal challenge, that personal meanings. So my question is, how do you create personal challenge when you set them up for these kinds of things? Like when you come from grade 2, then into grade 3, and then up to grade 6. How do you create personal, meaningful challenge in it? Dan?
I think with grade 6, we had a couple of adventures. And the first adventure, we basically set them up with the role that they would be most successful with. And then the next adventure we thought about a little bit more, and we thought maybe it'd be better, we'd get more meaning to the student if we put them in a spot where they were challenged. So we selected them based on not their strength, but based on something that they needed to be stronger in. And we found that what happened when they produced this project was just amazing. We had kids stepping up to the plate and actually hitting home runs with their work. It was great.
So giving the opportunity to be very successful at a strength and then challenging them at something. Obviously, they're going to do a lot of learning. Anybody got any other ideas around personal challenges? And I think you did something with Kids with a Cause, personal challenges. What was that related to?
Yeah. Kids with a Cause had a very social awareness piece to it. And so the students were able to just choose a topic, something that they were very passionate about. And then they had to follow through with everything that they did as far as the curriculum, the writing, the contacting. Some of them, it was personal phone calls to the organization. And they were so passionate about it. And then at the end, we showcased everything. And a lot of these organizations would come and visit them at the end. There was such incredible involvement and passion in there. It was just so exciting to see.
So we go back to those 4 points that Kane was talking about. Complex issues, very interactive, rich, and real. And we know that the brain is going to thrive with those kinds of experiences in the classroom. So it sounds great. What about this concept of unique? We're hearing that. A quote from, I think it's I'm not sure exactly who said this, but uniqueness is the rule, not the exception in the classroom. What do you do to make something unique and maybe surprising, where you can engage students?
Well, for us in grade 4, we did a learning adventure where we had a medieval theme.
Yes.
So we kind of used that to kind of engage the kids. And in order to make it something that they'd never seen before, we would kind of mix it up a little bit we would have the teachers be dressed up, maybe when they came in one day, or we would have maybe a fake leeching, or by leeching, I mean we would put little worms on them and pretend
these real
that they
worms
were.
or what?
Oh yeah, they were real worms. Not real leeches, but real worms. Mealworms. So that kind of fits in.
Did you get a reaction to these worms on?
There was a reaction. Yeah, I'm sure you can use your imagination as to what happened there. But it's something that they'd never seen in a classroom before, and they'd never seen, their teachers come in and act in a way that teachers don't usually act, just to try to get them engaged and make it something that'll stick with them that they've never actually seen before. So that was really exciting, I thought.
So let's follow up a little bit there. I know you had surprises in the hallway, signs up, even your agenda for the day was suddenly changed, and the students were a little bit unable to predict what was going to happen during the day. What kinds of things did you do in your unit?
Well, we did a lot of different things. So yeah, we did change the agenda. Ye olde agenda is a nice, easy one that we would do. So just to kind of phrase things, put things in different ways so that the kids would be surprised by it. So we did balloon animal sword fighting. Not animals, but I guess swords. We did balloon sword fighting. And had some high school students come and teach them the basics of stage fighting. And that was really exciting for them. We had a court jester come in and tell them jokes, and we had some storytellers come in and say, give them different examples of fractured fairy tales, and just trying to tie in some of that curricular content with that exciting those different novelties. That was neat.
Well, I've seen many things. I've seen chairs changed in the classroom, desks rearranged. I see those unpredictable things. I know that when you travel to India on one of your adventures, or even some of your adventures up north, students get a ticket in the door. What's that about?
Well, we travel to India and Ukraine. We actually try to do that with all our social studies units. And so the first one we do every year is India, and the students prepare. We take passport photos, teach them like they can't smile, you know, so that's even just a funny thing to watch the kids go through, you know, and then laugh and that. And so we prepare for that. They get their ticket and they plan for what they need to pack. We look at the weather, and then they come in one day and they can't walk in because I'm at the door dressed up as a flight attendant, and they have to have their tickets, and they're getting onto the flight, and we've rearranged the classroom into what is called a plane with aisles and rows. And we even talk about etiquette, you know, how do you get in on the plane, and you know, what would people be expecting for your behavior on a plane. So we even get into that as well as part of the learning for that. So
Dan, in your classroom, you've got a very large space.
Yes.
How have you become an architect of that space as teachers? Because traditionally in a school, teacher goes to the front of the room, desk is somewhere close or back front, and kids are lined up. And in your classroom, you've rearranged and sort of a whole architectural design.
Yeah, I think grade 6 was very lucky in getting this space because it was specifically designed for this type of teaching. And having the equipment furniture that we have, we're able to rearrange in order to make the right environment, I think.
Well, one thing I noticed in something that you've done is you've assigned the students sometimes to, or they've chosen different times, a role. So now you've got project managers set up in an area of the room. You've got other people doing different jobs. So how do you accommodate all of the groupings of students working on different things in your classroom? How do you set that up?
We just look at where the best places for them are going to be, and we make a special area. Like we'll take a corner and we'll make walls. We'll put walls around the corner. We'll set up desks. We'll have meeting areas. We just have everything planned out. So if the student needs to set up a meeting with another group, we actually have a designated meeting area where they can take that other group and both groups can meet together and plan out something that they need to complete for the benchmarks.
So you think about real and relevant, and you think about that's really how we work in the real world. You know, we go to the boardroom if we need the boardroom, we go to a cubicle if we need that. We move, and of course we know movement is one of the primary things to keep the brain alert. Oxygen's moving, kids are not just sitting down, etc. So any other architectural things that you've tried, grouping students even according to roles, or I know you set your 3 rooms up into different ways. How do you accommodate all the choices and opportunities for learning in your classrooms?
I think it really is, like you said, thinking it through before the kids come through the door. So just because they have choice doesn't mean that you don't plan anything. You have to really have thought through. There's going to be kids on laptops. Where are they going to be sitting? There will be kids sitting on the floor working on posters. Do I have space? Is there something hard for them? You have to have thought through the structure of your classroom. And I've had both experiences where I've thought it through and it runs smooth and the students know where their supplies are, everything goes well. And when I haven't thought it through, and at the end of the day you go, I shouldn't have done that. You know, this is what it should have looked like, and you can redo it for the next time. Because just because they have choice doesn't mean that it can be a free-for-all. There still has to be structure within that choice.
It's actually more structure to allow more freedom.
Yeah.
So the greater amount of freedom that you give students to choose their location, to choose how they're going to work, you have to build some structure. So let's go to this concept of structure, and maybe we'll come back, talk a little bit more of the emotion, because sometimes when we think of learning adventures, we think this is just creating fun for students. Well, fun is a byproduct. It's something that comes out of an experience, and I don't think we set up learning adventures to say, we're doing this so it can be fun for kids. We're doing it so students will learn and learn well. So fun becomes the byproduct, and so when we think about the structures, then we can see that learning actually is being tracked. And I've got a quote here that I took down. I thought it was very, very interesting. Comes from John Hattie. He wrote a book called Visible Learning. And he says in his research, he found that the most significant factor impacting student success is providing formative assessment for them. So you think about it. Think, well, the most significant factor would be choice. The most significant factor would be fun. The most significant factor could be this. And his research says that the most significant factor impacting learning is setting up structures for formative assessment. And that's where we can see that the curriculum now ties very strongly to the fun component of doing these great projects. So maybe we can just all add some thoughts around what kind of structures do you create to ensure that we're actually getting to a learning outcome, not just a fun outcome? What kinds of things do you do to track that learning is actually happening? Anyone?
One thing we do is a daily reflection during our adventure. So we make sure that the students are learning the curricular outcomes that are placed by the government. And we do it by asking them specific questions, and they reflect on what they've done for their specific role in their journey or in their adventure.
Do you find that you get some depth from them on that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, the depth they go into is much more than what we could teach them in a traditional lesson or a traditional classroom.
Well, the interesting thing is they know. You don't. You assume you know about them, but they actually do know they're learning. What other kinds of structures do you put in to ensure that we're coming to that curriculum is being covered, we're having fun while we're doing it, it's enjoying, but we're actually getting where we're going?
Well, we do something similar to that where we build in check-in points with the teacher using our Gantt chart. So throughout the adventure, as they go along, there are certain points where they have to come and they have to let you know, okay, this is what we've done, kind of report out in a way. And it's excellent because they really want to share what it is that they're doing. When they're given that freedom and they're given that autonomy, they kind of want to thrive on that and they want to show, hey, look at all that we've done with what you've given us. So.
Do they keep each other accountable? Do you find accountability within the group?
Yeah, because sometimes when we set up adventures, we also have a leadership group who goes around and helps them with that as well. So they are kind of accountable to the other people in their role and to the secondary student leadership role as well. So they all want to impress everybody and want to show.
So part of the tracking is them tracking each other.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
and keeping each other. I see that even in the older grades, as we move into junior high and high school, I see that the project manager role that you're developing, you're developing this idea of project management. That role gets really, really complex and very well done by the older students. What are the structures to make sure that they know that they're covering what they need to cover?
Well, one thing that we use in grade 5, usually before we really begin a great, big, huge project, actually probably about the first fewer times in, is a capacity map. And that capacity map that just says, here's a curriculum, this is what we need to be covering. And they're very, very honest with, I just don't even know what you're talking about, or I really know about this. And so that gives us a wonderful just an overview of what we need to be really emphasizing. And so there's a lot of team meetings that are all of a sudden, okay, we thought they had this piece, but obviously they don't. So what are we going to do about that? So we're restructuring the adventure itself as we go along. So that keeps us in check as teachers. And students are going to let you know whether or not they have that. And like in grade 4, we have those check-in times as well. So it might be the end of a little piece of activity. It's like, now that you've done this, here's your diary that you can go ahead and reflect on. And so those, then we hit some of the curriculum as well, but then we also know where they're at in that, in their learning. And we use it that way too.
Excellent. So actually the information is you're informing them, they're informing you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because finding out what they know tells you your next step.
It does.
Yes, and you do have to change and make. Because a learning adventure can be quite unpredictable in its outcome. If you give students choice, then sometimes it's going to go in a direction that you perhaps never anticipated. Have you ever found that happen? Does that happen for anybody you can think of? I can see it happen sometimes, where you say, I didn't quite realize we were going to go here with it, but it's okay.
We're in the middle of an adventure like that right now.
Are you?
Yes, we are. And our adventure says, what is light? And so the typical things that you think of are what are light. So we started with just brainstorming, doing a wordle. Give me some words. And so we put them all up. I think we came up with close to 400 words from our students.
Wow.
And then then they had to sort them, and then we moved up into the collaboration studio and did the sorting. And then the groups from those words were answering what is light were animals, life, God, space, and food. And it's like, okay, there are some places there that I would never have gone of what is light, like what is food. And those are the ones that they're now researching and in the middle of and making connections to in the real world.
Trish, I think you once told me that you feel that when the students do that, they actually go deeper into a subject than you would have taken them themselves.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about the process of Scan, Focus, Act, and
Yes.
how I just love that process. For first of all, Scan is usually where we're meeting the curriculum, and it allows for students who need more time to go back and relearn things. But then those students who actually get the Scan part of the project can go on and go deeper into their learning. And so Focus, they're taking something from their Scan area and saying, I actually want to go deeper and become proficient, really proficient, and look for other options in that area. And so, yeah, that Scan, Focus, Act, and then Act becomes the presentation part of things. How are you going to become a teacher, and how will you teach your knowledge and understanding to your peers in your class? So, yeah, it's a great way to allow students to get that Scan part and the curriculum part at different paces. So,
And I've seen in grade 2, so just so we know, can you do this in grade 2? Can you do this with 7-year-olds?
Yeah, we do the Scan, Focus, Act as well. I think I had a couple thoughts, but back to the formative assessment part, they're very much still learning what self-reflection looks like in 2nd grade. So you get everything from kids who are very in tune with what is going on and what they need to learn to some that still aren't sure, and they still need your guidance with that. And so with the checkpoints, we often have a show me what you know, and then as a teacher you go through, they've self-assessed, but you have also either checked it or circled it so they can see, oh, I thought I knew that, but maybe I don't. And from that they can track their learning. And I don't know if they need that as much in the older grades. They're maybe more aware, but that's kind of the first step. And then with the Scan, Focus, Act, I think it maybe just needs to be a little bit more structured with grade 2, but they still have the choice when it comes to the ACT project. As long as the benchmarks are very clearly outlined, I feel like kids of any age could do it if they're benchmarks that are practical for that age group. So
And I always say in the younger grades, you are building the capacity for them to do this very well when they're older. And so they're learning and modeling through with you how to become more self-reflective in their learning. And so you're doing such a wonderful job. It's very easy to go with the children in the classroom and see their enjoyment and their engagement, and to say, oh, this is a lovely way for children to learn. But how is it lovely for teachers too? Because we need to be in a bit of a win-win here. And can you speak a little bit about what it's meant for you to work in teams, planning learning adventures, and how much enjoyment is it for you in that journey too as the teacher?
Go ahead.
I think for us, I just know that when we get together and actually start pulling ideas that meet the curriculum and actually say, oh, that actually could be fun, you know, we get invigorated and excited with actually working with our students. And when you do a lot of the work ahead of time,
Yes.
before you actually present it to the kids, and so that is always a big job. But now when we're in the midst of a learning adventure, we're knowledge workers, and we're just helping kids find resources, and you know, oh, don't forget, check your benchmarks, you know, these sorts of things. But everything is laid out for them to meet quality and go to the next step when they're ready at the next step. So it's great for us. Yeah.
It's actually freeing.
Yeah,
Once
it
they're there,
is.
they take that responsibility and they just go with it. And we kind of step back and enjoy watching them. And I mean, yes, we're in there to help them as well with everything. I find for myself too, when you're planning with a team, the depth that you get is much, much greater than just by myself.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
You learn a lot about your teammates too.
Yeah,
And
you
you
do.
can also, you find your strengths.
You do.
And
yeah.
you can lean more on one person if you have to. And I think it's, you build the project that you're not expecting to build, and the outcome is just incredible.
Psychologist, his name is Luiz Caza, I think. Here's a quote that says that if your brain doesn't connect with another brain in a socially interactive way, it eventually shrinks. And that part of you actually dies. So I don't think anybody's doing that here. But it's interesting to show that not only are we trying to get collaboration with our students, but at an adult level, we also require them to feed off the brains of other people so that we don't shrink into our own little places. But I see that. Maybe we could just bring some of this to a conclusion by saying, think of a word perhaps that describes your personal, as a teacher, your personal response to building these learning adventures for students, and maybe just a word and a little explanation around what that word means for you, and just to show what it does for you as the teacher. Any words? A learning adventure is for you.
Unexpected.
It's unexpected. In what way?
In the sense you never know what the outcome is because you don't know where your students are going to take it.
And is that good?
That's lovely.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
It's wonderful.
I was going to say energizing. I was just thinking about a couple years ago, we didn't have as many learning adventures planned and organized and thought through, and we had just come off of one had finished, and we sort of went back to traditional, like the way and we all just kind of went, oh, you just feel tired, and the kids aren't as into it, and yeah, that energy wasn't there. So when you're in the middle of something that everyone's excited about, the energy is just...
It takes energy to do a learning adventure, but it also gives energy, so it's interesting. Some other words?
Mine was similar to Jen's, invigorating, and we just introduced our newest learning adventure with Rocks and Minerals Learning, but they're game designers, and so they have to, Mattel is looking for a new game for them to design, and seeing all the hands jump up when we first introduced, like, what do you think about this? What do you know? What are your first thoughts? And like my class was nonstop buzz. Oh, well, we could do this and this, and like just that right there in the initial introduction was invigorating. Yeah, exciting.
I think mine would be surprising, because every adventure, I always find there's the few surprises that you get from some students you wouldn't expect.
Yes.
And it's just an amazing feeling to see these students thrive in something you would never expect them to thrive in, and the stuff they produce at the end is just incredible.
It's quality, isn't it? Excellent.
Yeah, and with that, I would say excitement, because I feel like that ties with all of your guys of what you've said is it's just exciting to see what the students are going to come up with. It's exciting to see what your colleagues are coming up with and what they're adding to it, and it just makes you excited to come to work every day. It's awesome.
It's great. So there's even the possibility that we could enjoy the job, right?
Yeah.
That's for sure. But I do think that what I see, generally speaking, when you are in a learning adventure and you walk into a classroom, your students are engaged. They have owned something in that adventure that causes them to want to think. And we've seen that research that's rather depressing about our profession, is that the research shows that the youngest of our little children are the most creative. And as we spend time in school, our creativity index seems to go down. And I think learning adventures are keeping our creativity index alive and well. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate that. Energizing, exciting, satisfying, intriguing, even fun are the words we often hear from both students and teachers when they speak of learning adventures. Brain research tells us that there has to be a neurological change in the biology of the learner, an actual physical change in the brain in order to support long-term memory formation. As we, as educators, seek to understand how our brains work, we press forward to change the environment for learning and the conditions under which learning takes place. It's win-win. Teachers and students experience satisfaction, success, and even joy.